In the deep recesses of one's mind, there is a voice, a guiding light through the darkness, a connection to the other side.
You're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a poor little me.
Pathway to spiritual that echoes with enlightenment. The voice of spirit.
The voice of spirit.
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Your journey starts here and now. With your host and connection to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, very, very warm welcome. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world. We're going to be talking tonight about spiritism and mental health, because it's something that I feel very, very strongly about. And if you want to make a donation to the show, then please go to the site KCOR Radio, find this program and donate. All donations are very, very welcome. You can also have a look at my book Summerland, which is on Amazon, and a book called A Book of Thoughts, which is on Amazon. And sometime this year, I'm also going to be having my third published book on Amazon, and it's on Leslie Flint. So those are things to look out for. And of course, you can find all the programs on archive. So you're very, very welcome to have a look through all of those. So as I say, tonight I'm talking about spiritism and mental health, and there's a fantastic book called Spiritism and Mental Health, and it's written by a lovely friend of mine, Dr. Emma Bragdon, PhD. It's highly, highly recommended. It's I think essential reading, because there's a lot of interference from spirit side, and Dr. Bragdon she's appeared on the show, so if you want to look in the archives, you can find that particular episode. I think it's near the start of last year, and Emma feels the same as I do, in that 80, possibly 90% of mental health is due to spirit interference. And it can be on all kinds of levels, whether it's very mild and people, as some people are very suggestible, and things are suggested by spirit, but it causes a lot of complications in life. And I do feel that if we were more spirit aware, and aware of what they can do, how they contact us, how we begin to open up and discover the mediumistic talents that we have, because being a medium, as we've discussed many times, is quite different to being a psychic. All mediums are psychics, not all psychics are mediums. And basically, the difference is that when you're psychic, you're very aware of energies, people's energies, all kinds of energies. Psychometry also works that way, and so you are able to tune into those energies, and consequently, those energies affect you. Now, when you're working to pick up information for a reading or something like that, that's a good thing. When it's working on a darker or a lower level and you're picking that up, it's not such a great thing. It's worse if it's being picked up subconsciously as well. And mediumship also works that way. So we can get contact from spirit. Usually it's a good thing, very positive, lots of messages of hope and love and contact and confirmation of existence, etc. And that's good. But there are lower entities, as we know. Some are earthbound. They come on all kinds of levels, and there are levels where demons make contact. And I suppose quite a explicit image or explanation of that would be is, a tiny baby that not long in this world has no real experience of life. It's got a very happy home and very cosseted, etc. And for some reason begins to have nightmares and waking up and crying and quite upset, if not terrified. And that is an example of that particular child, that spirit, being contacted and being shown things and given feelings that it really doesn't like. So that's another way of doing it. So there are influences, and if we are aware as a population that we have these abilities, sometimes whether we want them or not, and we can be contacted, and 90% of the time it's very positive, but there are those connections which are unhealthy and stem from sometimes dark practices, dark individuals, and they connect in various ways. And the subconscious way is, to my mind, the worst of all. But if we recognise that we have these gifts and we recognise how we develop, what kind of contact we have, and I think if this information were made generally available to people, then we would be not so quick to label people as with mental health problems. And of course, those are very real in certain aspects, but in the spiritual aspect, that we understand that there is something unhealthy going on and how we can deal with it. And it's a very, very interesting subject. And I know I've talked many times about Ouija boards and things that can come through. That is, if you like, a more obvious connection of how someone can be contacted subconsciously and influenced. And one of the reasons that I was doing the show on this this evening is because I saw a documentary on Ted Bundy, and interesting, very interesting, a bit scary. Excuse me, a bit scary when you think of how he so easily manipulated people. Of course, in the end, he got found out, and all that's history. But one of the interesting things in that documentary was they talked about there was a slight reference to an entity, and it was also mentioned the fact that his eyes, which were blue, turned to black at certain times. And it was during the documentary, and I slowed it and played it back, and it was definitely there. My daughter was there watching as well, where you see him stare at the camera and his eyes are blue and you see them actually go black, and it's only there for a second. Now, he also talked about hearing voices. I feel personally that was not put on. I don't think that was an excuse, although he was a very intelligent man. But as explained lots of times previously, there is a very, very fine line between schizophrenic and schizophrenia and mediums. And in a very basic sense, the difference is with schizophrenics, they hear voices telling them to do bad things, influencing them to do bad things. And with mediums and mediumship, it's the good things, the positive things, all the love, that kind of thing. So it's a very fine line between the two, because we both are affected by and connected to spirit. And the only thing that's a difference is the origin. One's very, very negative and one's very, very positive. So that I found interesting, and really found interesting when I saw that change in the eyes. And I mentioned it to my daughter, and she said she saw it too. And we rewound it, and sure enough, there it was. So Ted Bundy was talking about hearing voices and telling him to do things, and incredible urge that came over him at particular times, which had to be fed. So there is a close relationship between all of this. And in the book Spiritism and Mental Health, Dr. Emma Bragdon, she's a PhD, goes through in great detail about her research and her studies. And she has studied this subject for many years, and so she drew the conclusion that there was a definite connection there. Now, there are some very enlightened people in the world who are psychiatrists and mental health practitioners and experts who are beginning to understand the connection between mental health, schizophrenics, hearing voices, and the things that mediums do as well. So there are some enlightened people, and some of them have made investigations into this very subject and are coming up with conclusions which are not too far, really, I would say, from Dr. Emma Bragdon's views and my own experiences. So again, there is a fine line there, but in identifying it, and I'm going to be talking about this, we can see how these things come in. So I'm going to relate some of my experiences and some experiences that I have heard of or have been given to me from old blogs, and we're going to be talking about that. So hopefully you find this a very interesting subject. It is something we all need to be aware of, so that at least we can, if we do have problems or we know of people with problems, we can suggest mental health initially, and a spiritual kind of fixing in collaboration with that, or as an alternative if the drugs don't work. So it's a very important thing to get across. So my first connection with a spirit that wasn't quite right was when I was quite young, and it was something that was allowed to build up under strict supervision of my guides. And there was an old man that was connected to my where I live, my dad's house, and he was strongly connected to my dad's bedroom. But as I was experiencing and developing all kinds of things, and physical things were happening, bed sheets were being pulled away, I was seeing people appear in the room, wonderful things, not negative at all. But I became aware of a gentleman that was connected to my dad's room, and I could see him quite clearly, and he used to connect with me. And that there's a process called overshadowing, where a spirit will connect so strongly that they literally overshadow or take over the body. Now, we have trance mediums, we have transfiguration mediums, where the body is given over in collaboration with. We always have control. So it's not a bad thing. But there was this overshadowing with this gentleman. And at first it was quite nice. I was very interested in it, in how the gentleman could take control, and I could feel his body and what he was like. And that was very interesting. And it went on for some time. And it was only after a fair amount of time had passed that I realised that as the gentleman was taking over, where my arms would be okay, my right arm particularly would begin to distort, would curl up. And at the time, again, I thought, well, this is interesting. I'm getting a real aspect of what this gentleman was like. It wasn't frightening at all. It was just another kind of experience. And so I allowed this to get on. But what did begin to concern me was that as this distortion in the arm and the other hand as well began to take over, and I began to, the body began to twist a little bit, and I was getting slightly concerned about this, to the point that one evening I decided that I would make a mark on the wardrobe to see how tall this gentleman was, because I felt the gentleman was bigger than me. I didn't realise how much bigger. I thought maybe an inch or a couple of inches. And where I used to live, I made a mark on the wardrobe on the surround, because it's one of the old-fashioned built-in wardrobes from 30s, 40s, something like that. And I made a mark there. And when I checked when he'd gone and I'd looked, there was a mark, and it was at 6'1". Now, I've never been 6'1", 5'8", slightly smaller now due to old age. So fantastic. Yeah, so that convinced me that this gentleman was very real, that he was bigger than myself, and that the way I began to imitate his body was definitely real. So after that, this continued for a while, and I was getting slightly more concerned that something wasn't right. So I wondered what I would do, and I realised that next time the gentleman took over, that I would check with the cat. Animals are very, very sensitive, as we all know, and there are lots and lots of stories of, horses, for example, saving their owners, dogs warning of things that would happen. It's very well known. So I left it, and I do remember, I think it was a few months after that the gentleman came to me again, and I allowed him to take over, opened my bedroom door to find the cat on the landing, and the cat took one look at me, and we had wallpaper called wood chip. So there's little bits of wood in the paper. It was very popular at that time. And the cat took a look at me and literally ran vertically up the wall, across the ceiling, which was also covered in wood chip, and down the other side, just to get away from me. So I realised at that point that whatever the connection was, and what this gentleman was, it wasn't a healthy one. And from there, I learned a technique from my guides of being able to clear that particular entity, clear the space, the room that I was in, and to protect myself. So it was a very, very valuable lesson that I learned, and we'll go in the next part of the program through that technique of how I managed to push this entity out and take control again. So that was my first experience, really, of something slightly negative. So, as I say, it was done under strict supervision so that I would learn. And basically what my guides wanted me to learn from that was how to sense when something isn't right or isn't what it seems to be and has a negative effect. So it was one of those life lessons, certainly in life as a medium, that is invaluable for you to understand there's something not right, and you can defend against it. And when I was at the SAGB, the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, and we'd taken over the council, and I was at that time asked to be president, which I declined, but I stayed on as a councillor, and we had a sort of open shop where people could come in, and if they had any problems could get assistance. So there were several of us that were mediums there that would help people, or a kind of question and answer thing, so they could just drop in. And one of the interesting things that I began to learn from that was that when entities start to influence you, and by the time you have realized, hopefully, that something is not right, can be a long time. 10 years, 15 years is not unusual. Now, lots of people, of course, have this impression that it's like the movies. You know, you get the Ouija board out, bang, that's it. Some monster appears and runs riot. But it really isn't like that. And we're going to be talking in the next part of the program of how that process begins and why it takes a long time. So I'm going to give you an insight as to how that happens and that process, and how the whole thing begins to build up. It's a very, very subtle thing. Again, it's not like the movies. It's much more subtle. And I think that in a sense is what makes the whole thing a little more frightening, that it does build up very subtly, and it's usually by the time you understand something isn't right, that it can be 5, 10, 15 years onwards. So that's something that excuse me, that we're going to be covering. So if you have any questions and you want to call in, then do call in on 702-425-9230, so we can talk about this very important subject, so that you can understand that it isn't unfortunately all love and light with spirit connection, and that there are basic things that we can do to protect ourselves. And if this helps anyone, which it's designed to do, then thank the Creator for that. But it will also hopefully help you to spot things that might not be right with loved ones or friends of your own that are acting slightly out of character or a lot out of character, so that we can understand what needs to be done. In those cases, we would also have spiritual healing, but again, they need to be practiced in the way that these entities work. So it's not just normal spiritual healing in that sense. So once again, it's 702-425-9230 if you want to bring up any questions about this, and we'll be straight back after this.
This is the voice of spirit, your connection to the other side.
To understand something spiritually, you must experience it. And in order to experience it, you have to experience it in your imagination.
Explore with us by calling 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Everything that now exists was once imagined. Therefore, everything that is going to exist must first be imagined.
Back with your guide to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Leo Bonomo.
After these brief words from our sponsors. Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code RADIO10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
You love them enough to do anything for them.
Mom, I need to be wiped.
Coming!
Including checking nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
Great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
We interrupt this program to annoy you and make things generally irritating.
At the end of the day, we turn the lights down in the KCOR studio.
Oh, sweet.
And crank up the hottest club songs from around the world.
This is the future.
The Grind, mixed by Tina Marie, your Vegas vixen of the high desert.
What about the body? What kind of body?
Good body, nice body.
Every night from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Pacific. The best 3 hours of commercial-free music.
New music first.
It's time to stand up and dance your ass off. The Grind, nightly and exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Come on, it's kind of hot.
Welcome back to the Voice of Spirit, your connection to the other side.
There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it.
Connect with us on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Even better, join us live in our chat room at kcorradio.com. To get a free reading during the show, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers, use Skype name KCOR Radio. And now, inspirational clairvoyant medium, psychic, and your connection to the spirit, the host of the Voice of Spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, welcome back. And if you do want a reading or you have questions, you can then get me on my site. And if you email me at info@leo-bonomo.com. So it's info@leo-bonomo.com. And we can answer some of the questions. And what we'll do is we'll do the reading live the week after, so presumably I don't get inundated with them, but certainly if you want to email me then and ask questions, and we can certainly do that. So just getting back to the subject of spirit influence. And one of the experiences that I had was that I was at a church, and I'd gone there on a day off, and I occasionally drop into churches. And I went to my local church at the time, and as soon as I entered the church, I knew that there was a real problem. And I called the lady who was the chairperson, but also who ran the church, and I said, I'm not quite sure what's going on, but there's something going on in the back room, and it's not something that anyone there can deal with. And she confirmed that there was a gentleman in the back room that was taken over by a very strong, violent, and very abusive entity. And she said, but we've got people that are dealing with it. And I said to her, quite frankly, I don't know who's there, but they haven't got the experience to be dealing with it. And it wasn't something I wanted to deal with myself. And it was subsequently borne out during the demonstration, because we could hear violent knocks and screams and very abusive language, and there was obviously something of a struggle going on, and an attempt to hold the gentleman down. And so this interrupted the demonstration somewhat, and the medium, carried on. And after a short time of silence, it broke out again. So there were several interruptions, but towards the end, the gentleman seemed to be very quiet. And I said to her, the chairperson, that whatever was done hasn't done the job, and he needs to be taken to, or certainly put in touch with, someone that deals with this on a professional basis. Again, whilst I have done some clearings, I tend to pass them on to people who are much more experienced, and they deal with that as a speciality. So there are specialists that you can find that can deal with this. Anyway, it was a couple of weeks later, and I went back to the church and I asked them how they'd got on, and the entity had found its way back into that gentleman and had caused a lot of problems. And I was informed that he was subsequently sectioned. So a very, very unfortunate incident. Now, the problem with this kind of connection is that an entity will... We all have a voice in our heads. So when we're talking to ourselves in our heads, or we're having conversations, there's our voice, which we kind of use to get some sort of reaction or talk things through, within ourselves, within our own mind. And one of the ways that these entities connect to us is that they mimic our own voice and they echo our thoughts. And this is not noticed for quite some time, until the entities start to very, very subtly imitate their own inclinations, whether that would be of violence or something else subversive. So we get used to our thoughts, or what we believe are our thoughts, and that subtle influence and that subtle change from it being our thoughts to being the thoughts of this entity being expressed. And so we don't notice initially that there's that changeover. And it's only when the thoughts start to get more aggressive, more against our own nature. And as I said before, the first part of the program, this can be 5, 10, 15 years on. It's only when we start to realize that some of the thoughts we're having are not very nice. They can, in fact, make us feel quite sick depending on what's being proposed. So it takes a long, long time, but they speak to us in our voice, mimicking our thoughts of goodness or whatever, and that builds up very, very slowly. So by the time that you realise there is something not quite right, that entity could have had a decade of influencing your thoughts, controlling your mind, and making you feel things, certainly towards the end, that you are quite averse to, but which is the nature of the beast. And I say that in a fairly light tone, but also the nature of the beast as in something horrific. And that certainly was the case with Bundy. You know, the crimes that he committed, appalling crimes. And of course, lots of people get put away, imprisoned, because of vicious attacks. You know, we had the Yorkshire Ripper in this country, and you know, you can look at any country and find out some of the horrific things that have been done. So the influence starts very, very subtly and takes a long time to build up. Now, you may question why, 5, 10, 15 years. Time doesn't matter to spirit, whether they're positive or negative. There is only time in our world because we need a sense of it, and that's been created by the seasons. So if we're planting crops and we need seeds to be sown at a particular time so that they can be harvested at a particular time, so that nature takes its own course and bears the fruit. So we have had to have a sense of time woven into our daily lives. So for us, it may seem to be a very long time. In spirit, it doesn't work like that. If we're in spirit, there are no seasons as such. Certainly on the higher planes, there is no darkness. We don't get evenings. We don't see stars. We don't have winters. That kind of thing. So you can imagine yourself if you go away for a holiday and you're just, in that sense, disconnected from phone, which is very unusual nowadays, TV, etc. You can very easily, in a couple of weeks, lose track of the days and not understand that actually, you've a couple of days of the holiday to go to run. When you're in spirit, and you may have been there for hundreds of years, whether you're earthbound or not, that can go in some senses very quick, in some senses very slow, depending on where you are. But time doesn't matter to spirit, so they can wait it for eternity. And one of the problems that we also need to understand is that some of these spirits that attach themselves to people have been doing it for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. So they may have a couple of thousand years experience in fooling people. Whereas unless we have knowledge, unless we have some experience, or we can gain some experience through reading books such as that one, Spiritism and Mental Health, we have one chance to experience something, and it may be pleasant, it may be good connections with spirit, it may be not. The problem is with the good experiences that we have tend to be instantaneous and very vibrant and very loving. The other ones tend to take time to build up. So we don't have experience in that. So unless we have the knowledge that these things can happen, we are, in a very real sense, an open door. And spirits are not so obvious. The ones that are negative, and causing harm, and so they can take time in our sense, but no time in their sense. So it's something that builds up very, very slowly. I was also approached by a couple of sisters many years ago now, and they were concerned about their brother. Their mum was concerned about him as well, because he was connected to an entity that really wasn't very good. Now, they had gone to a spiritualist church. They had picked this thing up from a spiritualist church. It was something that was connected to the building, and quite often when spirits see light or understand that people are aware of them, connected to them, having readings, able to reach out, they will naturally be attracted. And this is one of the things as we begin to develop, that we're woken at night and loved ones and others are excited that we've discovered this ability and want to talk to us. And it's very it can be very hard when you've got students that are discovering this wonderful ability. They're giving readings themselves. They're having connection with spirit, to shut off. It's one of these natural urges of, this is wonderful, I want it to continue. So it's a bit hard to dissuade students at times to, we need control of this. Night times when we sleep, and when we work, we work. So it's a bit hard to instill that discipline into students. But of course, if we haven't been trained and we're being contacted, then it's very, very difficult to defend against it and to have any kind of experience without the experience actually being in that process. And what was happening with this gentleman, and what was extremely interesting, was although they'd gone to a spiritualist church, he was very, very much a Catholic, very religious. And what this entity, there were in fact 5 within him, but what the main entity was doing was using his religion against him. So after some time, he'd convinced this gentleman that he was an angel, in fact that he was Jesus, and he gave images of Jesus to him, or what that gentleman accepted as Jesus, on the cross in various kind of poses, I suppose is one way of putting it. And then what the entity, and because he felt that he was having a religious experience rather than a spiritualist or spiritual experience, he was accepting this. And Jesus, of course, was very loving, etc., etc. And after a time, this entity had convinced this young man that he had offended Jesus and that he was now damned. And at the point where I become involved, the gentleman had been standing still in a room for days. I managed to cleanse the whole house, but as I went to his room last, because that's certainly a way of doing it, is clearing, if you like, the weaker influenced areas, he started to get extremely agitated. And this entity knew that I was there to help the situation, to push him and the other 4 out, and began giving the young man visions of him burning in hell, or what his idea of hell was, and how he would be tortured, for eternity. And the interesting thing there was that as he was talking, I could see burn marks appearing on the arms. So this was something that was real. It was certainly very real to him. And so it went from an initial contact of him naturally wanting to shake my hand to not quite making contact and pulling away because this entity didn't like what was going to happen. So we tried clearing it. He did become quite aggressive, but managed to contain that. And so I was there for, I think, about 3/4 of an hour, something like that. And then what I did was I withdrew. The sisters were in the room with me, but then we all went outside, and I did say to her that whatever was embedded there of the 5 had a very strong hold. We were not going to be able to deal with this, and what I suggested was that the police and a medical team be brought through. So we did explain the situation to the police. The upshot of that was that it took 6 policemen to hold him down. Enormous strength, which sometimes accompanies this kind of invasion. And so he was held down. He was charged or sanctioned as mentally ill that night and taken away. The wonderful thing was, after 6 months, he contacted me. He'd known exactly what had gone on in great detail. And I said to him, this is something that you may want to record. You know, you may want to write a book, or you may want to make some kind of note of what's happened. That he declined to do. But what he also asked was whether he should train to become a medium. And obviously I said to him, look, you know, there's no way that that can happen. You're susceptible. Entities that work in this way tend to leave back doors, in computer terms. They leave an opening to get through. As far as I know, the gentleman is perfectly safe, perfectly well, but he did need to be sanctioned and helped with drugs for those 6 months. So the interesting thing was he was completely cured. When I spoke to him and met him, completely different person. So that was a wonderful outcome. But that doesn't tend to happen. In some cases, there is a release, thank God, but in many cases, they do leave a way of getting back into that individual. And the important thing is that with that gentleman, it was a fairly short thing. It happened over a few months. But again, the entities felt they had so much control that they didn't need too long. But as previously said, they do leave a back door. So if there is an entity that has taken lots of time, that has taken years to create that weakness, to exploit that situation, they have access again to that person. And so what they tend to do is they'll wait some time so that the person will appear normal, and then they'll reconnect because they have left that opening, and they'll start the process again. Usually it's much quicker because they've had that control, they affect the mind, and of course it carries on from there. So some entities are very persuasive. As I say, they have been doing this for literally thousands of years, and they convince the person to act accordingly. Now, sometimes within that person, I would say there's a dark part to all of us, and I would certainly say that I would be no different to others, except that we tend to control the odd dark thoughts or a thought of revenge, or for something. We do have those thoughts, and most of us can just push those away and deal with it. These people that have been affected can't, and that is the real problem that's there. So they are affected by this. The entities gained access, has gained control, and it's much easier for it to do it a second, third, fourth time, whatever happens. And again, the notable difference between schizophrenics and mediums is that we contact positive entities, spirits, and the schizophrenics, they're taught and connected to by very negative energies, sometimes echoing those bad thoughts and expanding on them. So there is a lack of control there. It is also a feature that sometimes people will open themselves up. And one of the ways of doing that is through the Ouija board. So we're going to be talking after the break about some of the experiences that I've encountered with Ouija boards, some of the effects there, and I'll be talking to you about some of the mediums that I've spoken to that have had these negative connections, because again, not all mediums accept because they've had positive results. Not all mediums accept that there is a negative edge to this, and I'll also be talking about some of the things that I've done in conjunction with others, because Toys R Us twice tried to get a pink board specifically aimed at 8-year-old girls onto the market. And as we've often said, we're more connected to spirit when we're here, as a generality, up to the first 6 years, then we are more connected to the earth. And of course, there has to be that changeover. We have to ground, but it's not always lost. So it was a very malicious thing to try and get those boards specifically aimed at children. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about that and some of the experiences that I've had connected to road boards and other mediums. So we're going to be talking about that straight after this, and we'll see you then.
You've been listening to Leo Bonomo, the host of The Voice of Spirit. Live every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the show, guests, and host of The Voice of Spirit, or to book a private reading, please visit leo-bonomo.com. That's leo-bonomo.com. Your connection to the other side is just a phone call away. The Voice of Spirit.
It is amazing, is it not?
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
In the deep recesses of one's mind, there is a voice, a guiding light through the darkness, a connection to the other side.
You're ready to wake up, you're going to wake up. And if you're not ready, you're going to stay pretending that you're just a poor little me.
Pathway to spiritual that echoes with enlightenment. The Voice of Spirit.
The Voice of Spirit.
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Your journey starts here and now. With your host and connection to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, very, very warm welcome back. I want to give a big thanks to Mike Kay for writing in and reminding me that Ted Bundy also did some good, as Mike says, in a morbid kind of way before his execution, because he was starting to help detectives on the Green River murders and some other murders, and he was giving an insight into the way that he was thinking, the way that they would be thinking, and he I wouldn't say he helped to solve murders, but he certainly gave them a very good insight into the kinds of things they would do next and where they would be. So in one sense, quite a lot of good came out. I do believe I remember from the program that this was the first time or very close to the beginning of proper psychological ways of working and having the psychology on the person and where they would be and where they were likely to be born and, likely influences. So, but it's interesting that Mike said, and it actually came out in the program as well, that Ted Bundy was given spiritual insights into the way that he could help with murders, with the psychology behind it, and give them clues. I was thinking at the time, in that part of the documentary, that perhaps this entity which had influenced him had, in a sense, it had done its job. It influenced him. It had caused a lot of deaths, a lot of misery. Ted Bundy was going to be executed. There wasn't really much more that it could extract from that situation, and I think that entity left, and Ted Bundy still had that gift of some of these spiritual insights, and whatever has happened to him, an amount of good has come out of this because it's helped psychological profilers to identify lots of ways in which people think, etc. So some good did come out of that, and I know that sounds a strange thing to say. Okay, yeah. So going back to again my school days, I had a friend that attended a party. We were still at school. We, like a lot of people, had, within my family, even as a youngster, we were given a tiny, tiny drop of wine to have with the meal. So a drink wasn't unknown to us, and we tended to be sensible with it, and we had a respect for it. But this friend at school, he went to a party, had a lot to drink. And just as in the horror films, everyone drunk, thinking, what shall we do? We'll get the Ouija board out. And what happened to my friend, which was a real blessing, was that he was picked up by a spirit and thrown down a flight of stairs. That is something that really sobered him up quick. Now, we may think of that as being quite horrific. We may think of it as being very negative. But what I understood years later was that actually the spirit that caused disruption and threw my friend down the stairs and some other things was actually something very protective, because it stopped the use of the Ouija board, certainly on that night, and it scared so many people that they didn't want to play with it again. So I know certainly from my friend's point of view, he didn't want any connection or hint of a connection with Ouija after that. So again, what appears to be a negative situation was opened up, and ultimately lots of good come out of it. So that is another experience that I had in talking to people on my old blog. And if you want to take a peek at that, because it's fairly extensive, it goes back to 2008, cover lots and lots of subjects, and it's called It's a WordPress blog, and it's Mediumship and Life After Death. It's all one word. And I had people write to me, mediums as well as others, who'd had very negative connections with spirits and entities through the Ouija board. Some of them great mediums, but again, had experience of it and has had nothing to do with Ouija boards ever since. And one was a young lady, and from the States, and she wrote to me saying that when she was quite young, her older sister had a Ouija board tucked away in one of the cupboards, and she was told never to play with it, never to touch it by her parents, etc. And of course, she got the board out, and she said as soon as she touched the board, the lights in that room, the bulbs blew. And she felt that there had been a connection made at that time. So it was just merely a touch and this explosive kind of reaction. And she began to tell me of lots of things that happened. Her family owned several houses, and there was a flat on the third floor of a building. She never felt comfortable in going in. She was talking about another time when a car began to follow her, and she realised something nasty could happen as a young woman, and whatever was there within herself, her guardian angel, guide, whatever connotation you want to put to it, made her very aware about this car. In the end, it pulled away. But she said that she was dogged with bad luck throughout her life. And when she contacted me, I do believe she was in early to mid 40s. And she said that she'd had so much bad luck with all kinds of things, relationships, etc., money. And as she related her story to me, she was wondering whether that was an effect of that contact with the Ouija, and the entity, whilst not connected to her directly, was still having an influence over her. And I do believe we sorted it out. I managed to reassure her. We went through a practice, which we're going to go through in a minute, to clear whatever was there. Now, one of the things that we can do is, as we open our chakras, and so for those of you that don't know what the chakras are, there are thousands of chakras in the human body. As they get smaller and smaller, they go down to what we call meridians, which are used by acupuncturists and aquapressure specialists. But the main 7 are the red at the base, which is at the groin. You have the orange, which is at the spleen, which is more or less an inch or so below the navel. These are all lined up in the centre of the body. You have the stomach, which is yellow, and you have the heart, which is green, the throat, which is sky blue, and the forehead, which I always see as indigo. And I always see the crown, although some people see it, or you can see depictions of it as being ultraviolet. I always see it as brilliant white light. So we can open these, and it's just a matter of visualization. And as we open these, we also ask for a brilliant white light to be drawn down from the heavens, whichever way you would see it, and that brilliant white light is drawn from above, because that depicts a higher vibration, into the body. And the way that I've always been taught, and it was the way that I helped to clear myself in that room, was to see this brilliant white light begin to fill the body. So if you imagine the outline of your body, and it begins to fill your toes and your feet, ankles, goes up through your calves, knees, thighs, hips, fills the abdomen from the stomach up into the chest, and also filters through the shoulders into the fingertips, palms, wrists, forearms, elbows, upper arms, and the shoulders, and then the neck, and then the head. And we then allow it to overflow. So it's like a beautiful cascade of light, like a fountain or a waterfall, filling you up. And then we close that off. And what we allow that to do is it will start to go dark. It may go black, but do not worry about that. But it goes, what it's doing is it's collecting anything negative there. It can also heal, and it cleanses the body, but not only the physical, but the mental, the spiritual, the astral, the etheric bodies. It begins to cleanse all of those. So it will collect all this rubbish and it will go dark. And what we then do is open the chakras which are in the feet and allow this this soiled energy to filter through the body, deep into the earth. So we're left, if you like, with a void. And once that's all gone and we see that going into the very depths of the earth, we close the feet chakra off and we open the crown again and we fill with brilliant white light. And that's what we do to cleanse ourselves. It's something we should do whenever we sit in circles, certainly if we're teaching. And we refill with brilliant white light, and that's the energy that we work with. And so that's a way of cleansing ourselves. And if we do that all the time, it will have beneficial effects on the body. And that's, obviously that's something good, but that will also affect the spiritual bodies and the mental as well. So it cleanses all of these. And what we can also do is to cleanse a room is to imagine brilliant white light and paint the walls with it, the ceiling with it, the floor, and where they join. So it's a kind of spiritual mastic, brilliant white light, as brilliant as you can imagine, and paint through the corners and go through all the rooms in the house like that. If we have large cupboards, we would do those separately. I tend to do the stairs separately, so I do those as a block or an oblong. And we cleanse the whole house like that. It is something that after a bit of practice we can do quickly and confidently, but it is something that we should do if we get disturbed sleep, is to do that at night. You'll find immediately that you'll have a good night's sleep. It is very powerful, and if you do it too much, for example, every night for months, it will completely close you down. That is something you may not wish, because we want to retain our sensitivity. But we can clear houses like that. There was a house that I was drawn to because the person came to class and needed specialist help. And her house, it was actually the house next door that were playing with the Ouija, but what it did, it had opened a portal in her house. And what I do when I go to places like that is I walk around and I sense where the portals are and which rooms are most affected. And I do this so that I can say to the person, this is where a portal is. It's very cold at that point. Sometimes it can feel quite dense. There's a resistance. This is where this kind of thing is happening in this room. So they have confidence in understanding that I know what I'm talking about. So, for example, in that house, there were 2 or 3 portals in the kitchen. Cupboard doors were opening, drawers were opening, doors were getting slammed, that kind of thing. And the interesting thing is where her and her boyfriend used to sleep, they had a large cast iron bed, very heavy. And when they used to sleep in the bed, the bed would be spun around the room. So it was almost as though the bed was on ice. And would be spun around the room and moved around the room. That for them was particularly frightening, because to have them moved would be one thing, but them and a heavy bed really shook them. So we cleared that house. I showed them the techniques for carrying on the cleansing after we had cleansed it together that evening. Didn't hear any more, so I know that was something that was successful. So these techniques do work. We have to understand that we use them, but we don't have to be afraid. One thing I would also say is it's not something that you should tamper with. It's not something that you should try just for the, pardon the pun, the hell of it. It's not something that you do out of curiosity. There are always people that are experienced in this kind of thing. Again, mediumship takes us different ways. Some people really specialize in cleansing properties and dealing with problems. And a friend of mine that sat in my circle, he'd attended a circle some years before where people that were earthbound were helped. Now, that's a good thing. But if you do too much of it, it turns into a rescue circle. And this guy was quite burly. He was over 6 foot. He was in the police. And there were a couple of friends there that were also from the police, and they needed big, strong men. There were women in the circle as well, but they needed big, strong men, because when they performed rescue of these entities, they would sometimes get very violent, and the other members of the circle would physically have to restrain whoever was taken over. Again, big, strong men in their own right, but when they're energized with that power, that negative power can become very strong. So he had those experiences there, and we shared some experiences, and it was a real blessing for me to experience that. So there are ways in dealing with this. It is not something that you should fool with. It's not something that, unless you have early experience or great experience and are especially protected, that you should mess with. People do think that it's a bit of a laugh, it's a bit of a joke. We can deal with this. It isn't something that you should fool with. Now, there are different stages of entities, and I know lots of people have talked about demons, and we see a program on TV and that's what a demon's like. They are not how you would expect them to be. Many of those entities are not human in any sense. And that should be a warning to you. Having said that, fairies have never been human. Angels have never been human. There are all kinds of spirits and entities, connected with the earth, connected with water, that have not been human at all. So there is a portion of them that have never been human and are very positive. So that's something that's good. But obviously there are a whole host of those that have not been human and are decidedly negative. And that, in a sense, is what the program is about. So they can affect us in all different ways, very subtly at first, but can have huge consequences. And it's a common thing, you do hear it all the time. If you like to watch TV and you watch programs about, this serial killer or that serial killer, or people that just completely lose it and end up in prison mental hospitals, the one thing that they tend to say is that they hear these voices which order them to do various things. because the energy or the entity feeds on fear, and if it creates fear in you, fear of an inability to control, fear of what you're being asked to do, commit murder, whatever it might be. It feeds on that fear. It feeds on that energy. So there is a real there is a real connection between that and the voices that they hear. My mind's being drawn to Ghost, if you watch that film, where he's singing Henry VIII I Am just to get through to Whoopi Goldberg, to make her, Patrick Swayze is trying to make her give in so she listens to him. Again, that kind of thing is real, and if you can imagine where it's got to the stage where it's really got a grip and it's wearing you down in that way, you will become distraught, but if you've no other option, then you will carry out what's been ordered of you. And lots of people talk about the voices telling them to kill, telling them to do various things. So it isn't done in a very subtle way. It isn't done as, well, you can either go with it or go against it. By the time you've got to that stage, you have no control. So I think it's something very important to point out. But there are things that we can do. And again, I think if it was understood that actually negative spirits can affect us this way, and some of the psychiatrists are very aware, as I say, and on board with this and can tackle it from a spiritual point of view, we can more or less, I believe, eradicate mental illness. Okay, we're just going to go into a break and we'll be back for the last sector after this.
This is the voice of spirit, your connection to the other side.
To understand something spiritually, you must experience it. And in order to experience it, you have to experience it in your imagination.
Explore with us by calling 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Everything that now exists was once imagined. Therefore, everything that is going to exist must first be imagined.
Back with your guide to spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Leo Bonomo.
After these brief words from our sponsors.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Alien Deceptions, a suspenseful sci-fi romance thriller by Tina Marie, featuring the tantalizing Erica Jones and the mysterious Russell Hamilton. An out-of-this-world book of fiction based on years of document facts and files the government does not want you to know about, at least not yet. Alien Deceptions by Tina Marie. Available now at Amazon.com or get a signed copy at TinaMarieEntertainment.com. Get your copy now.
You are listening to the all-new KCOR, The Core. KCOR broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada to the entire universe.
Okay, forest animals, kids are coming to the forest, and it's up to us to make their visit a good one. Sparrow, have you practiced the most popular bird songs for the year?
Of course.
Catchy. I like it. River, how's the temperature?
It's a refreshing 52 degrees, man.
I love it. Turtle.
He's not here yet, man.
He's late every morning. Okay. Squirrel.
The forest has been preparing just for you. To learn more about cool things to do in the forest, visit discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council.
What is our reality? An ever-evolving concept? An individual experience? Or just life? Tune in Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern for Our Reality, hosted by Violetta Vrankovich.
You guys ready for this?
Come join the movement each and every week as we explore a range of topics, from the ordinary to the extraordinary. Violetta will emerge your consciousness with unique concepts and guests, taking you to places no other show has ever dared to go.
Carefully designed to stimulate the mind.
Our Reality, hosted by Violetta Vrankovich. Live Saturdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Our Reality. Changing the world, one topic at a time, at a time, at a time, at a time, at a time.
If you love them enough to sit through their favorite boy band with them, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Voice of Spirit, your connection to the other side.
There's no accidents in this universe. We all show up here with a purpose. There's an intelligence that is a part of everything and everyone, and all of us are connected to it.
Connect with us on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Even better, join us live in our chat room at kcorradio.com. To get a free reading during the show, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230.
Give us a call now.
Worldwide callers, use Skype name KCOR Radio. And now, inspirational clairvoyant medium, psychic, and your connection to the spirit, the host of the Voice of Spirit, Leo Bonomo.
Hi, a very warm welcome back. As I say, if you want live readings, do email me on info@leo-bonomo.com, and you can find me on the web. And if you have you want a reading, or there's something that you want to discuss, then I can connect live with a relative of yours, and we can do that reading next week. So if you haven't got time to physically phone in, Skype in, whatsoever, do email me and we'll get a reading done in that way. We're talking tonight, or I'm talking tonight, and my guide's helping me, about spiritism and mental health and some of those problems. So it's one of those subjects, just talking with the producer in the break. You've got programs like Charmed and, those kind of programs where it's all treated as a bit of a joke, the three witches, they're going to get rid of this demon and that demon. And it's kind of a safe environment because it's like, well, this is a program. And there's a real false sense of, I was going to say reality about it. And just like the Ouija, it's a joke, it's fine, it's okay, it's not real. And I think that's the shame of what's happening in the world today is we don't take these things seriously. And if we did, and we have any suspicion of friends and family that may be over emotional, may not be controlling themselves, it isn't always just the pressure and stress of today's living. There are other things. And as we are becoming more and more aware in a spiritual sense, and I've talked about 2012 and the shifting of vibration many, many times, the fact that we are opening up and becoming more sensitive and allowing our connections, generally with very positive spirits, there are these dangers. Now, the way that I've been talking about it tonight, you may think, that the negative entities are running rampant and we've got no chance. It isn't all that common. But of course, we do hear about it, and we do hear about serial killers because that's a thing that happens. And unfortunately, in all parts of the world. So there is an over-awareness in some sense of these killings and some of these terrible acts that go on, and terrorists, I think, are also affected by these things, and they are allowed to be brainwashed, or they are brainwashed, and it opens up all kinds of negative aspects of the self. But so whilst there appears to be a lot of it, I think it's because it's more recorded nowadays, but it isn't the usual thing. So don't worry about it too much. If you're aware and you take precautions, then everything will be okay. So there's not as much about as you may sort of gain from what's been said tonight, but it is a problem, and it is something that needs to be tackled as much from a spiritual sense by psychiatrists, but also, with medicine. So once we're aware, then we can do something about it. There's a great friend of mine, Jock Brocus, who we will have on the program at some point, and he's written a bestseller, and I love the title. It's called Deadly Departed. You can get that on Amazon, and basically Jock talks about some of his experiences that he's had with negative entities and some of those things that have happened. Very interesting book, so if you want to read it, it's called Deadly Departed, and again, you can get that on Amazon. So there are lots of ways in which we can become aware, and again, awareness is protection. And there is that saying, isn't there, that the greatest trick that the devil ever performed was convincing us he wasn't real. And if we do believe it's a joke, Aka, or also known as the Ouija board, it's a game, it's not. If we are aware that as well as psychics and mediums and that kind of contact, there is a dark side to this, then if we're aware of that, then at least we can do something about it. And if there are things that we feel or experience that are not right, then at least we have the awareness to say something needs to be blocked, something needs to be done, we need to take care of this, rather than just say, well, it's not real, it's not a problem. That's when it starts to become a problem. So hopefully you've found this aspect of it, of the program, extremely interesting. If you do have any feelings in that regard and you want to write in, then there's something that we can do, and I can pass on your comments, or if you need advice in that regard. You may have heard a couple of weeks ago we talked to Margaret, who's extremely experienced, over 30 years as a medium and also as an exorcist, for want of a better phrase. And if that's something that you are interested in, you can't contact Margaret directly, but you can get in touch with her through Psychic World. And if you have a look, I'm just going to find the email address. You can address it to Margaret, and you can get it through Ray, pw, Psychic World, pw, at virgin.net. So if you have questions or concerns about that or somebody else, you can get through to Margaret through Psychic World newspaper, and you can I'm sure she'll be flooded because she's very hardworking. There's a tremendous amount of workload that she has, and you can get in contact with her through there. So you may not get an immediate reply from Margaret, but you can certainly get some advices or some help, and she can deal with it in that way for you. So if you're interested in this subject, go back a couple of weeks, listen to the archive and to Margaret, and you'll get another insight there into this aspect of it. It's again, I'm really thankful to Mike for not only for listening, but also for that input on Ted Bundy and reminding me of that. So there are things that we can do. We can protect ourselves, and the easiest way to protect ourselves is to acknowledge that not everything that comes through spirit is friendly. Not everything it has our best interests at heart, and that's one of the problems with the Ouija board, because people generally say, is anybody there? And that is an open invitation. It's a bit like leaving your street door open in a really bad neighborhood and just leaving some money, some valuables in the hall and saying, come and get it, because the entities will not waste any time. They often have, certainly the more powerful ones, they often have, the best way to describe it is victims, really, but they often have 4 or 5 victims or more on the go. Again, spatially, time and distance have no effect with spirit. They can be in different places at different times. And one of the ways I can explain this is I do have clients all over the world, America, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, the Emirates, believe it or not, lots and lots of places. And with the Skype or telephone readings of that sense, it works in one of 2 ways with me. Either the loved one is with me, giving me the information that I can then relay to somebody in Australia, for example, or they're with the person in Australia giving me the information. And that's actually quite a good description, really, of time and distance not being anything to spirit. So they can, if you like, be in control of several people in all different countries of the world, and they can have that ongoing negative and destructive influence over them. There was in Wales, in England, several years ago, a spate of people that were committing suicide, and these were late teenagers, early 20s, and there was a spate. I think there was more than a dozen of them. They weren't connected. They didn't know each other. That committed suicide. And this is something also that a destructive energy also gets pleasure from. And I was contacted one time by a lady who was a good medium. And she was quite frightened. And basically, in the space of a year, she'd gone from being a very healthy person to being in a wheelchair to lying in bed, literally waiting to pass away. And the entity had got such a grip on her that because of her knowledge, and this is the way it works, it uses our knowledge against us. It obviously had a very great physical effect. It had had a great mental effect. But what was really troubling to this poor woman was that this entity told her that it was going to kill her, and that when she passed, it would literally devour her soul. So she herself would not exist. And she was quite terrified. And we worked for some months to try and get round this problem. Unfortunately, I did lose contact with her. I was talking to her husband, and she'd kind of panned out a little bit, but then there was no more contact. And so, unfortunately, I'm not sure what happened. I hope she would be okay. But it can, the end product of contact can sometimes be just your destruction. For example, I was working, I used to be a jeweller for about 18 years, working in hand garden in London, hand making jewellery. And I had a very, very nice friend, and he was a jewellery polisher, and they used cyanide, and we used to have lots of chats and lots of laughs, and sometimes I would walk him to the bus stop as I was going to the train station. And this happened one Friday, and he was jolly, cracking jokes, we were having a great time, and went home, came into work on the Monday. And this poor gentleman called Darren, he'd been found dead Saturday morning, and he'd committed suicide, and he'd taken not arsenic, what was it? He'd taken oh my God, I'm sorry, I've forgotten. He'd taken the cyanide. That's what it was, because cyanide is used to clean jewelry, and it was industrial cyanide, and it's not like in the films, a slight brush on the lips and that's it, you're dead. And he took a cup, it was discovered, of cyanide that he'd stolen from work, and had drank it. Now, again, cyanide isn't as quick as you think it is. And basically what it does is it strips out the throat and the lungs and burns. So it is not a quick passing. Certainly leading up to the moments before you pass, it is quite painful. But he had the strength to drink this whole cup of cyanide. Not a good way to go, bless him. But it's an example of, I think, an attachment, perfectly normal one moment, obviously planned to take this, and this was undue influence, of course. Fine and dandy Friday morning, Saturday morning, drank this cyanide. And sometimes people are influenced, and for the entity itself, that is the complete goal. It's just the destruction of that human personality and the freeing of the soul into spirit. And sometimes, it will have an attachment to that soul as it leaves, and keep it earthbound. So it isn't always that passing will release you from this, because there is a strong spiritual connection there. So it's a very important thing that we understand, like mediumship, like connection with spirit. It is real. There are good and bad in the world, as we are very, very well aware. And there are also good and bad from spirit as well. Now, the bad is very, very minimal compared to the good, but it is there. As everyone knows, I'm very, very fond of Leslie Flint and those recordings and his wonderful work. So I'm doing a book about Leslie Flint, which hopefully will come out before the end of the year. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is during those conversations, those seances with spirit, which have been recorded, as I say. Questions were asked about the darker side and what happens, and to people that are what we would term certainly as extremely evil. And the interesting thing is that the voices are always quiet on that subject. There's obviously a very good reason for it. I'm not clever enough to work out what that reason would be, and we can all speculate about what that might be. But it's interesting that they don't want to bring any of the dark or negative things into those conversations, and I believe that's the primary cause. Their intention, of course, is to show that we do exist, that there is happiness, that there is a life that continues, which is more real than the life we're living. They often refer to this life we have as a dream, very much limited. So they need everything to be upbeat. So I know that that's part of the reason for it. But also I think they don't want to introduce some of the negative things into people's minds and give them cause for doubt and making them susceptible to it. So I know that there are dark things there, but certainly if we are aware, then we can make provision, we can protect ourselves against it, and we can do what we can to push away the dark side for ourselves and for others. And it's very important to remember that we need to bring light and love into this world. Of course, there has to be balance. That is the whole thing, in a sense. But it's good to bring love and peace and joy into the world. As always, we're sorely in need of it. But if we can understand that we can affect things in a positive way, then we can affect the outcome of negative spirit connection in a positive way. And being aware of it helps us tremendously. So I hope that you found this interesting. If you do want to read my book Summerland, which touches on aspects of this, you can get that on Summerland. You can get that on Amazon. You can also get a book of thoughts, which is thoughts and observations by spirit, mostly in a poetic format, but also in other types of observation. So you can do that. Again, if you want to read The Deadly Departed by Jock Brocas, that's JOCKBROKOCAS, Jock Brocas. You can find that on Amazon as well. There is a wealth of information. What I would strongly recommend if you're interested, of course, is Spiritism and Mental Health by Dr. Emma Bragdon, PhD. And again, you can find that on Amazon. So hopefully you've found this interesting. We have another program next week, as you know, and do listen in, do tell your friends, do check out the archive. And again, if you want to go back a couple of weeks, and Margaret was on the line, very, very experienced medium and exorcist, and I'm sure that you'll get some insights there. And if you do need that kind of help, again, you can get her through ray.pw@virgin.net, and that's the email address for Psychic World, the newspaper. It goes out all over the world, and you can make contact with her through there. So if you have any questions, you can direct them to me, so you can email them to me. Read these books that I've recommended. They are excellent books, and it'll give you some insight. So what is it they say? Knowledge is protection. So, once we're aware. So if that is hopefully of some interest to you and of help to you, and makes you aware, then that's the job done. So fantastic. Next week we have another program. I can't remember who the guest is at the moment. I do apologise for that. But we'll see you next week, and we'll be covering another topic, and we'll be doing readings. So if you want to have a reading live, we can do that. That's fine. If you want me to, if you want to get in touch with me by email on info at leo-bonomo.com, then I can take that email and I can do a reading for you live the week after I receive it. So fantastic. Lots of love. Take care of each other. Do good, and do help all that you can. God bless.
You've been listening to Leo Bonomo, the host of The Voice of Spirit. Live every Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the show, guests, and host of The Voice of Spirit, or to book a private reading, please visit leo-bonomo.com. That's leo-bonomo.com. Your connection to the other side is just a phone call away. The Voice of Spirit.
It is amazing, is it not?
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.